In part 1, we asked the question, why was there a large river crossing over Nicaragua on a handful of old maps and an encrypted Masonic drawing, while the rest of the maps showed no crossing there and were much more truthful to the topography today? Only after publishing the video did the thought cross my mind. If you were a controlling world power like Spain, and a world-round dominant merchant superpower precursor to the Dutch East Indies Company or the likes, would you tell your competitors you knew a shortcut from the Atlantic to the Pacific through Central America? Or would you keep it a secret? I did admittedly make one vital mistake in part 1 by saying you cannot today sail from the Gulf of Mexico, Caribbean Gulf, known as the Eastern Sea, to Lake Nicaragua, as the San Juan River did not seem a viable sailing route from the lake to the Eastern Sea Gulf. I was actually both wrong and correct, and despite the film getting 25,000 views with 1.5 thousand likes and 31 dislikes, above average for our usual 95 to 100% average, I did get attacked in the comments sections for daring to ask a few honest questions.
How dare you!
By a small percentage of cancel culture internet underwear jockeys, who I will not shame on screen, saying that I was retarded for not noticing the obvious San Juan River that is still there today.
How dare you!
So I dug deeper to correct my folly, and what I discovered lends more credence to the 200-year mud flood cycle evidence. So in order to thank them, we are opening up a Space Buster strip club for them called Bolsheviksens. They pay a $20 entry charge and $50 at their table, and the stranger 2 tables over gets a large beer and a private lap dance on their dime, while they comment real time online about how stupid that other guy is. In the library of Conmengress, we find an 1852 London book by Ephraim George Squire called Nicaragua, Its People, Scenery, Monuments, Interoceanic Canal.
Library? What's that?
It's where the internet tells us the Rio San Juan River is as wide as 245 meters in one part, and as deep as 11.5 feet in some parts. But the actual books from those who have paddled it tell us it's as narrow as 240 feet in many parts and less than 3 to 4 feet deep, with jagged rocks and severe rapids in 5 different parts. Well, the internet almost tells us about that. As his story says, the goddess Christ offer Columbia us allegedly coasted along the entire eastern Gulf of Mexico shore of Central America, from Cape Honduras to Nombre de Dios, o Chagres. And Columbus was probably the first European discoverer of the port of San Juan. Just to digress, we were told in school that Christopher Columbus discovered America with a big story about the Mayflower, Pilgrims, and Plymouth Rock in 1620, which is actually a guy named William Bradford, who I've never heard of. Columbus made 4 journeys in all. I guess he gave up on India, and never even made it to Florida. He was in Cuba and the Caribbean islands. So Americans should be eating Jamaican jerk chicken and smoking fat buds for Thanksgiving, not turkey and corn. But anyway, on his 3rd journey, he makes it to Greytown, San Juan del Norte, or North, the eastern Atlantic entrance to the San Juan River, which may be the port of San Juan just described in that book. However, more interesting, there is another San Juan in Nicaragua, called San Juan del Sur, or South, which just happens to be located in the exact position the exit hole is from Lake Nicaragua to the Pacific Ocean on the few maps that do show a passage through, about 1/3 up from the southwestern point of Lake Nicaragua. And more interesting, right exactly there is a river coming out of the lake heading toward the ocean, and a river coming out of the ocean heading toward the other river. And they suddenly just stop for no reason in the middle of nowhere with a mere 2.7-mile gap between them. And they aren't the only ones there, but we'll get back to all of that later on. Also, if Columbus never got to the Pacific Ocean and William Bradford doesn't get to the Americas until 1620, then how the hell did Munster know on his 1537 map that there was a long, thin, elongated island northwest of the opening with a very distinct wrench or Y-shaped top to it, which today is completely sunken under the Pacific Ocean in the exact same shape, and only Isla Isabela on the Y-shaped top and a few small islands remain above water? How did he know? We already covered the idea that these people had transcontinental zephyrs since the 1400s already in our Blimps on the Belfry video. But it is very possible that Colerbus secretly made it down the San Juan River to Puerto San Juan del Sur, and that is why the few maps from his day showed the passage through Nicaragua before the mud flood. Anyone familiar with the sign of the Master Mason will recognize old Colerbus's blatant hand sign there. In 1529, Captain Diego Machuca, already residing in the city of Granada on Lake Nicaragua, undertook the exploration of the lake, discovered its outlet, passed down the San Juan River to the port at its mouth, and sailed thence to Nombre de Dios, the name of God. The principal river rapids in the stream they say, not river, still bear his name. We are informed by the historian Gonzalo Fernandez de Oviedo y Valdez, who was in Nicaragua in 1529 and was personally acquainted with Captain Machuca. Yep, he said the principal rapids. Let's look at the San Juan River itself and question why then did a few Masonic cartographers draw such an exaggerated, enormous passage of this crappy little river on their world maps if it dead-ended in a lake. What, a ship drops off supplies in the Atlantic to be taken laboriously across a perilous 35-day river journey to be loaded back on the ship after it sails around South America in the exact same time? Why bother? How then did historian Valdez and General Machuca and his men even get to Granada if the river hadn't been explored? Not only is the river only 3 to 11 feet deep and full of jagged rocks, but it has 5 rapids along the journey. In complete opposition from early cartographers, from at least 1852 until today, large canoes and bongos are the only way to make the entire river journey. As Britannica points out, navigation of the San Juan is impeded by rapids at the village of Toro, El Castillo, and Machuca, and is limited to boats with shallow draft. Get ready, Tartaria mudflood reset researchers. During the migrations to California from the eastern United States between 1850 and 1870, before the 1869 Transcontinental Railroad, travelers transferred at San Juan del Norte Greytown from Atlantic steamers to small boats, which went up the river and across the Lake Nicaragua. Then they traveled overland to the Pacific port of San Juan del Sur. Great shortcut. So much for covered wagon convoys and Manifest Destiny. The rapids named after General Machuca are the first and most formidable on the river. The bed of the stream for nearly a mile is full of rocks and stones, between which the water rushes with great force. The boats in ascending are kept close in the right shore and are poled up, slowly and with great difficulty. In descending they are often kept near the middle of the stream down which they come, glancing between the rocks with the rapidity of an arrow. In descending in my bongo, which obeyed the rudder very imperfectly, struck with immense force and got jammed between the rocks, which its broadside to the current, where we remained for 30 hours, until literally dragged out by the united crews of 6 boats after half a day of incessant labor. The boat was of great strength, or it must inevitably have gone to pieces. We were 4 hours in passing the 1-mile Machuca. At present, the steamer Oris, sent out by the American Atlantic and Pacific Ship Canal Company, lies a wreck on the rocks of Machuca. At Castillo, the quarters of a small garrison are kept by the Nicaraguan government to assist boats in passing the rapids of the castle, which, although narrow, are very powerful and better deserving the name of falls than rapids. Here the boats have to be tracked up by sheer force, and it is usual for all passengers to land and to lighten the boat in every way possible. It is often necessary to take out a considerable part of the freight, or to wait for the arrival of another boat so as to join forces in making the ascent. The point is, the source of the San Juan River is Lake Nicaragua, with its outlet mouth at San Juan Lagoon, Greytown. The San Juan River is a 119-mile river that flows east out of Lake Nicaragua into the Caribbean Sea. And here's the big elephant in the room. As we read, I do not regard what we call the 2 lakes of Nicaragua as separate lakes, meaning Lake Nicaragua and Lake Managua to its north, because they connect the one with the other. They have made a separate lake on the side where is León de Negrando, on the lands of a cacique named Tipitapa, which communicates with a narrow channel with that of Lake Nicaragua. But what proves that they are both one lake is the fact that they are equally abound in sea fish and turtles. Another proof is that in 1529 there was found in the province of Nicaragua upon the banks of this lake a fish never seen except in the sea and called the swordfish. I have seen some of these fish of so great size that 2 oxen attached to a cart could hardly draw them. The one found on the shores of this lake was small, only about 12 feet in length, like this 12-foot great white shark, and must have entered at the outlet of the lake. What? Aside from the Atlantic salmon and spotted sea trout, there are only 3 other fish that swim upstream for spawning, none of them found in that region of the world. Are you telling me that all of these abundant sea fish, turtles, bull sharks, and 12-foot-long swordfish swam 119 miles upstream in sometimes 1 to 3 foot deep water, up 5 small falls and arrow speed rapids, to end up in both lakes for no reason whatsoever? Or is it more likely that they are in those lakes because they came from the Pacific Ocean right next door before they were sealed off by some earth-changing event? Isn't it interesting that there are 2 San Juans in Nicaragua, one at the eastern base of the San Juan River and one on the western coast where the Masonic maps show the other end of the river? Why else name both of those cities that? Isn't it peculiar that Columbus allegedly finds the New World in 1492, But William Bradford and crew wait 130 years to finally come over. And then when they do, nobody thinks to head out west to explore and claim new land until the 1840s, over 220 years later, only to find out when they finally get there that everybody there already hablas español, and all the west coast is already Spanish dominated, settled, and named, even though Spain hadn't been the dominant Armada sea power since 1587. And how are they even getting over to the west coast of America from Spain before the English settlers if there wasn't already a shortcut through Nicaragua in the Armada days? Is it because they physically couldn't make the journey due to mud liquefaction and major earth changes? Is that why they were taking steamboats, bongos, coaches, etc., all the way around Nicaragua and back up to get out west to California? When we look at the absurd elevational topography and the incredibly strange dead-end ghost river systems between those two lakes and the Pacific Ocean, I suggest the same thing may have happened in Nicaragua, sealing off these lakes and the ocean life within them, and that perhaps there once was a much deeper and easier transcontinental San Juan River route there in the 15th and early 16th centuries. Perhaps even these Masonic maps in question are copied from that older time and different Earth geography. Even today, we have this river north of El Playa El Coco draining into the Pacific Ocean, but from where? What source? Who knows? It mysteriously starts in the middle of nowhere, with a coincidental 5-mile gap between it and a river draining from Lake Nicaragua, clearly heading right towards it, also dead-ending in the middle of nowhere. The quickest, most destructive, erosive forces on Earth just magically on vacation. Meh. We find the exact same thing with our suspect San Juan River, ending in San Juan del Sur, a clear river connection again, from the middle of nowhere to a 2.9-mile dead end in the middle of nowhere, to what was clearly headed towards a head-on collision with another river coming from Lake Nicaragua that also just dead ends in the middle of nowhere. The topography maps show clear 800-foot elevation changes, while the overhead photos show flat farmland in that elevation, not jagged river-stopping mountains. I found 4 examples of this phenomenon between both lakes and the Pacific Ocean without really looking very hard.
How dare you!
Can you find more? Do you even care? We certainly don't. We just got paid $70 for our last 3 months of ScrewTube videos, so we're heading down to Bolsheviksens to buy some commie stranger a free beer and a lap dance. See you there.